Well, good morning. I hope y'all are doing well. Like I did last week, I'm going to wait just a minute or two to try to let people tune in. But after we get some people started watching and we give it just a second, then we'll get into our lesson. Hey, Kelsey's the first one to watch. That's my preacher's wife there. Bonus points for you, babe. Yeah, I would give it just a couple more minutes. Let somebody else besides just Kelsey. I do hope everybody's doing well. I hope you've had a good week since I last saw you. We've got a lot done. Been working out at the house and a lot of schoolwork that I let get piled up, but did some of that, and I don't know, probably a few other important things I just can't remember. So as we're starting to get going this morning, one of the things that the way I wanted to kind of introduce this was to think about just for a minute or two what it's going to be like when we do finally get back together. We finally get to see everybody's face again. I'm curious, like, how much people are going to have changed. Because I don't know, it may end up being 2 or 3 months in total by the time we see each other out. Maybe longer. I don't know. But yeah, I'm really curious how much people are going to change since we last saw each other. Like if somebody is going to surprise us and they've like lost like 40 pounds or something, or like how some of the kids are going to get. I'm sure some of the kids are going to be taller. Maybe somebody will have grown a beard or something, preferably just the men. But I know when you don't see anybody, I know shaving starts to go out the window for ladies. I'm well aware of that. But yeah, I'm curious how people are going to change. Kelsey, actually, she gave me a haircut this past week. And believe it or not, I gave Kelsey a haircut. Now, she hasn't posted any pictures on Facebook yet. She doesn't really want anybody to see it. But, yeah, I did that, so that was fun. But I am curious how much people are going to have changed. I'm ready for this to be over, that's for sure. All right, so we're going to go and get started. So today's lesson is going to be called, or titled, Making the Most of Your Time. Making the Most of Your Time. If you've been on TV or any kind of media whatsoever, I'm sure you've seen one of the things that they're doing is they will post these clips that have like several famous people that are talking about, stay at home and blah, 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 blah. And they're trying to endorse like, we want to try to be safe and get through this pandemic as best that we can. And I saw one of them, and it was like professional athletes. I think it was just football players on YouTube. It was one of those commercials, and it was really cool because it started showing all these, superstars, these athletes, and they're talking about the things that they're doing at home. And it's really neat because, I typically think about these professional athletes like all they do around the clock is, eat, sleep, breathe football and staying in shape and getting in better shape and watching what they eat and looking at film and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool because they're all, like you see this big, massive, strong guy who you only see like, run somebody over on TV on a Sunday night game. And it's like they're sitting down and coloring with their 6-year-old girl, And so it's really neat because you see like how are they spending their time, and they're endorsing, hey, stay at home and spend time with your kids. One of the athletes was like wanting to learn Spanish and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool to see what people are doing with their time, And I'm really glad for 99% of that stuff, and I'm proud of them. So that's all good. But, being a preacher, being that this is a sermon and this is a Sunday morning, I do want to take it a little bit further, and I want you to focus today on making the most of your time, but not just on things that are physical, but on things that are spiritual. Not just getting projects done around the house. Like I said earlier, Me and Kelsey have been getting a lot of work done at our house that we're hopefully going to sell this summer. And it's very beneficial, makes a big difference. It saves us a lot of money from having to pay somebody else. But, that's all good and hunky-dory, but there also needs to be taking advantage of this opportunity for us to grow spiritually, for us to exercise our faith. So a few scriptures I want to start off with, and they say pretty much the same thing. Ephesians 5:15 and 16, Paul says, "Therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of your time, because the days are evil." And again, in Colossians chapter 4 and verse 5, it says nearly the exact same thing. Paul says, "Conduct yourselves with wisdom toward outsiders, making the most of the opportunity." So Paul understands that, we need to make the most of every opportunity. We need to make the most of our time. And I think one of the reasons is we need to think about what can happen if we don't spend our time wisely, right? So if we aren't spending our time wisely, what's going to happen? You're going to spend that time. It's going to go by, but what's going to happen? It's so funny. Like, I probably shouldn't tell this on myself, but man, when I get bored, which doesn't happen very often, but if I get everything done that I need to get done and I have free time, like, if I don't give myself a productive task, most of the time my default is, like recently Kelsey has introduced our family to, there's our tubs of cookie dough that you can get at Sam's Club now. And man, is it good. So my go-to is getting the tub of cookie dough, maybe like the family-sized bucket of cheese balls, and just sitting down and watching Disney Plus, And man, you can burn some time and do the opposite of burning calories. You can pack on a ton of calories just sitting around, bored, doing nothing. And we all need a break and we all need to relax, and I'm not bashing that. But there's plenty of times that I've just binge watched something, and you get done and you're like, why did I do that? Why did I just eat 3,000 calories of cookie dough? And, so when you don't decide and determine to, I'm going to spend my time wisely, something that can happen is you can start to fill your time with things that are not productive or maybe anti-productive. Maybe you're going to start filling them with bad things. So some interesting scriptures you might not have ever heard before. They were a little bit fresh or new to me. 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 11. Just after talking about Paul is taking issue with people that don't want to work. Like, they don't want to provide for themselves. They just want to live off of other people, which is very bad, by the way. Paul says, "For we hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies." Acting like busybodies, which is interesting. Something that's bashed. And 1 Timothy 5 and verse 13, after he's talking kind of in a discussion about younger widows, but just a general truth. He says, "At the same time, they also learn to be idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things that are not proper to mention." And so, one of the things that he is concerned about is these young women, and this could apply to anybody, these young women that have become widows. Well, guess what happens? Now they've got, all this free time. Maybe they don't have kids. They don't have a job. They don't have things to keep them busy. So they just start going around just gossiping and talking. And because of their idleness, that turns into an opportunity for them to start doing things and talking about things that they shouldn't be. And lastly, and this scripture is insane to me. 1 Peter 4:14 and 15. Peter says, "If you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you." So, that's a good thing. But make sure that none of you suffers as a murderer. Listen to this list. As a murderer, or a thief, or evildoer, or a troublesome meddler. Which I thought was man, what a list to throw a troublesome meddler in with, like murderer, And I'm not saying that those are totally equal, but a big thing that Paul is aware of is people left to themselves, or with a lot of time left on their hands, will just start to get in other people's business. left with time on their hands and not put to productive work, taken too far, will take that opportunity to just start doing stuff that's bad, right? So, that's part of why we need to make the most of our time, right? So, why should we care about how we spend our time? That's another good question to ask. Why should we even care? Excuse me. And I think there are several reasons, but they all have to deal with, our time on earth is limited, right? So to throw out a few quick scriptures, Psalm 19 verse 12, the psalmist talks about our days are numbered. They don't go on forever. Our days are numbered. James 4 and verse 14, another passage you probably heard before. James talks about our life is but a vapor, right? And it is, it's here one day and gone the next. And it's something that quickly vanishes. 1 John 2 and verse 17, which I really, really like this verse, is John says, the world and its lusts are passing away. And I think he's saying it more of a positive context of, don't get bogged down with the world and its lusts, because look, man, those are temporary. But there is some truth, like, man, all that stuff is passing away. Like, there is a time clock, and it is ticking down. And lastly, and I do want to go read this one for you, is John chapter 9. John chapter 9, and Jesus has an encounter with a blind man, and he's talking to his disciples, because his disciples say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? Which is kind of an odd thing to say. But Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned, nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. So it was an opportunity for Jesus to come by and heal him and show people that he is the Son of God and he has the power to forgive sins and all that kind of stuff. But verse 4, right after that, Jesus says, we must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day, which is kind of a symbolic thing. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Which is, man, that's a powerful scripture for me individually as a Christian. But the big point is, man, the days are numbered. There is going to come a time when I won't be able to do these works, right? I will have, gone back to heaven. There's going to come a day when you won't be able to take advantage of any opportunities that are before you because you'll be dead, right? It'll be over. So, why should we care about the way that we spend our time? It's because at the end of the day, there is an end of the day. There's not always going to be the next day. There's not always going to be forever. So let's make the most of the time that we do have. So the last big thing that I want to talk about is I want to, and this isn't going to involve a ton of scripture because some of it I think we are all aware of. I'm just bringing it to light again. What are some ways that we can spend our time wisely? All right? What are some ways that we can spend our time wisely? And we've talked about this some in our virtual Bible classes, and just I've seen people post about it already. So I think a lot of you already know some of this stuff, but I at least want to say this as an encouragement to keep doing it, or maybe as a challenge to start something new. All right, the first thing is pray. One of the things that you can do to spend your time wisely is to pray. Pray for what is going on right now. Pray for the people that are sick, that are dying, the families of people that have died, for the people that have to work around this stuff. I see it at work, even though I'm in dispatch and we have like a closed, locked door, and I'm not really out on the front lines per se, but I get to interact with EMS and all these people that respond that are the first line defense for the COVID-19 stuff. So pray for them, people that work in the hospitals, that work around it, families that are going through that stuff. Not just our current issue and pandemic, but there are a lot of issues that are going on in the middle of this crisis that are maybe harder for us to deal with. So for instance, like with Sugar Grove, there's several people that have lost loved ones in the middle of this big stay-at-home period. And it has caused it to be more difficult for them to find peace or encouragement, or for people to reach out to them, because you just, practically speaking, you just can't, be there as much in person. But people are finding ways to get around that, which is awesome. But anyway, prayer is something that you can do without having to be face to face with anybody is to pray for those people. And lastly, it might be a good opportunity, if you do have a lot more free time now, a good opportunity for you to start some new habits like your prayer life. And that is something I'll be the first to say, that I do not have a good prayer life. It is, I don't know. It's hard to pin down why exactly it's hard for me to have a good prayer life, or what excuses I make, or whatever you want to call it. But I do know, for instance, a great example is the Daniel 6 verse 10. It talks about Daniel has a consistent, and he did his normal, usual, he goes, the thing goes to the window, he opens the doors, bows his head, and it's it's 2 or 3 times a day at the same time, and it's like everybody knows that was what got him, convicted and thrown in jail and get in trouble. Everybody knows that, man, this is something consistent that Daniel does. Now, there's a discussion to be had that I think prayer should be spontaneous. I think prayer should have purpose. Jesus bashes on vain, repetitious prayer, so you've got to be careful about that. But there is something to be said about, maybe I can use this time to get more comfortable with, I'm going to improve my prayer life, okay? So that's one thing, and I know I spent a lot of time on that. But another thing is studying the Bible. Oh man, Will, it's the most generic thing I've ever heard. Yes, but there's just something so valuable and important about reading God's Word. And this may come as a surprise to people, I don't know. 99% of my Bible study comes from preparing for church lessons. And, it's good because it helps me to study, and it's good because I still learn a lot and I get fed, and it challenges me to think about things. But it's also kind of bad because I still need to have kind of my personal Bible study, if that makes sense. I still need to be doing some of that stuff, not because, it's my job. I need to be reading things that are beneficial just to me, just for my personal knowledge and growth. And so I want to say I'm right there with you, but I challenge you, study your Bible. And, I know, there's some people at church and elsewhere that, there's 1,000 different methods that you can use. Something that people at church are doing is reading the same chapter every day for 30 days, right? So as opposed to, reading a chapter every day, maybe you forget what's going on the day before, the day after, whatever. Just read the same chapter over and over and over. And after a month, think about how well you'll know that one chapter. You'll know one chapter extremely well, and you can really apply it. So that's a good idea. Maybe you want to pick a small book. Maybe you want to pick an important section of a book. For instance, I think it'll be extremely valuable to read the Sermon on the Mount. It's 3 chapters. They're kind of longer chapters, but it'll fly by once you've read it a few times. You'll be like, you kind of understand what's going on. And man, if you read the Sermon on the Mount every day for a month, how beneficial would that be? So I encourage you to do that. Something else you can do to wisely spend your time is reach out to people. Reach out to someone who is maybe in a dark place right now, who need help. Find out what people's needs are, the whole getting people groceries, that kind of thing. Reach out to people who are in a good place, just to check up on them, to encourage them to keep on keeping on. Write a card, make a phone call, do a Zoom meeting. I know I don't know if it was Crystal who put it together, or somebody put it together, the car drive-by for Ricky, for the Darties. Find ways to still stay connected. Okay, I think that's a very important thing to do, because right now it's hard. You feel like you hadn't seen each other in a while, and you can feel isolated. And make sure you reach out to those people. Another way you can spend your time wisely is meditation. And maybe I should have connected this right with the Bible study thing. Meditation. I know sometimes we bash on meditation, or maybe that's just me. I picture some weird hipster soccer mom doing yoga kind of person with incense burning, and it's that's what No, meditation is a very, very biblical thing. It's actually seen a lot in the Bible, and it's just contemplating and thinking about spiritual things. It's coming to grips with, where am I at spiritually? What stuff do I need to work on? I just read the Sermon on the Mount. I just read like for the Bible class we had a few weeks ago with Josh, it was Hebrews 11. Okay, I just read Hebrews 11. Man, what can I really glean from this? Okay, so this is the point. Now I'm just going to stew over this. I'm going to think about it. How can this affect my faith? What can I learn from their example and apply it to my life? So I think meditation is really, really big. In fact, I think a lot of people's personal problems that they have in life, they don't address, they don't fix them because they don't take time to just meditate on, what does my moral resume look like? What do my moral statistics look like? Man, what am I doing poor in? What do I have a D- in? What can I bring up to an A? So meditation, I think, is a really big thing. And lastly, and this may be an odd one you haven't heard, I don't know, but I'm going to throw it out there because I do think it's a wise way to spend your time, and that is write something. Write. One of the best things I ever did in school, the most fun exercises I ever did, was one of the assignments we had was we were supposed to write, I think we wrote 2 or 3 different kind of psalms, or maybe it was just one, but write a psalm. I know it sounds crazy, but write a psalm, or write a spiritual goal, write a spiritual diary. In some way, write something down. I think that could be really useful. Sit down, and when I wrote my psalm in school, I talked about, I guess you want to call it a spiritual sin that I was dealing with, and man, like how therapeutic it was to just voice your thoughts, voice your frustrations, your struggles, what you need to be working on, and wanting to do that, and you kind of look back at the Psalms for like, how does David write stuff? And man, one of the most powerful things you can learn from the Psalms is that is like no boundary territory. That is like free reign. Like the Psalms, if they say anything, is you can pour out your heart to God. You can say the bad things, and at the end of the day, you finish it off with, nevertheless, your will be done. Even though that's where my feelings are at, and this is where I'm at, with my struggles and my spiritual frustrations, I'm going to try to do better, and I want to keep God's plan first. But also, so that's like a psalm. You could write down, a spiritual diary, maybe keep track of some things, but also sit down and write out some spiritual goals. One of the things I've been thinking about this morning as I was thinking about this lesson is our dream. I don't know if this will happen. This may never happen, but our dream is we would love to build a house one day. And we've started a Pinterest account, and you've got your saved pages of ideas for like, this is what we'd like to do for the back deck one day, or we would love to have a workout room. And we have all of these different pages of like, we want to have this. We want to be able to facilitate these activities. Like I would love to have a full basketball court. I mean, that'd be a ton of money, but the kids would love it. I would love it. I'd be out there all the time. Great exercise. And as I'm looking at all these Pinterest pages that I've saved and different ideas, I've also noticed, I don't think I've saved anything that really says I have set any kind of spiritual goals. So for instance, and this is not like a standard I'm imposing on myself or anybody else. It's just something to think about. I haven't made any pages about, making a study room, making a quiet meditation room, a prayer room, a Bible office, a library for spiritual books. I've had nothing in our Pinterest list that is like, this is going to facilitate some spiritual goals. Here's we want to have an add-on to our house so that if we ever know somebody who's going through a hard time, they've got a place to stay that's kind of like a little detached. It's like they're a little miniature home, whatever. I mean, it's like if I can dream about building a $30,000 in-ground pool, water resort, why can't I dream and focus on, I'd love to set a goal one day to be able to facilitate a spiritual goal. I'm setting a goal now that I want to build something one day that's going to have a spiritual impact in somebody else's life. So that could be another thing that you could be writing down is what are some spiritual differences that I want to make in my life going forward. So as we close this out, I just want to reiterate, I know people are already doing really, really good things. I know people are doing some things at the church building while all this is going on, making improvements to the building. I know people are teaching their kids. They are incorporating scriptures. They are still being involved in Bible classes and activities. And for the most part, I want this to come across as an encouraging lesson. Just keep doing what you're doing, and this is not meant to bash on people. But I also know that, if you're like me, maybe you've had a few days or a few weeks at a time where you realize, man, I'm not really doing anything spiritually. I'm not really spending my time as wisely as I could, and I want to be able to look back on when this is all said and done and we all get back together and, Will's gained 30 pounds and, whoever's grown a beard and, the kids are so much taller and everybody's giving hugs and we're just glad it's all back together. And that's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great day. Wouldn't it be great to look back on the entire stay-at-home COVID-19 period and we could have all of the Sugar Grove membership or anybody else that tunes in and listens, you could look back on that time period and say, man, I was able to get caught up on some stuff around the house. I was able to lose some weight. I was able to accomplish some little tasks that I've always been wanting to do and I haven't had time for. But I was also able to grow and exercise my faith. I read the Sermon on the Mount 35 times. I was able to incorporate a prayer before I went to bed every night for the last 45 days. I was able to reach out to 10 different people. I was able to take food to 10 different people. I wrote 45 cards. Whatever it is. I sat down and for the first time in my life, I made a spiritual list, a spiritual goal of things I want to accomplish next month, at the end of the year, in 5 years, whatever it may be. And when we get back to church, we aren't like, oh man, we've got all this stuff. We gotta regroup. We gotta rethink. We gotta start over. No, when we get back to church as a family, face to face, when we're all together, we are going to be stronger than we were than when we last met. And we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to have mature faith, and we're going to find ways to, what can I do to incorporate myself into this congregation to grow the church and to grow the work of the kingdom. So let's have that mentality, let's use this as an opportunity to grow our faith, to spend our time wisely, and to become better and better Christians, okay? And I hope most of that comes across as encouragement and not as I'm trying to bash on anybody. But just keep up the good work, guys. I'm super proud of you. The things that I see on Facebook or if I talk to you, I think everybody's doing really well. And if there is any need that you have, don't hesitate to reach out to me, to one of the elders, to another member at church. If there's something that we can do to help you, whatever it is, a spiritual need or a physical need, just let us know. Don't let all of the social distancing keep you from asking for help. But we love each and every one of you, and just make the most of your time, guys. I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and hopefully I'll get to see you here Wednesday night or Sunday. Y'all have a good next few days and good week.